Good evening to each and everyone. Let us start with the Universal Invocation. We silence for a moment. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other. Let us meditate for 1 minute. Thank you. Now I request Sister VIBHA to start the program.
Thank you, Brother Pradeep ji. Namaste and good evening, all dear brothers and sisters. So today we are continuing the study of chronological letter number 18, which is Mahatma letter number 9 in the Barker series. We have already completed 2 sessions on this letter. Let us have a quick recap on what we have already done till now. This letter, as was said in the beginning, it marks the beginning of philosophical teachings from the Mahatmas. The knowledge which was being revealed to the world through the Theosophical Society. Mahatma ji says that this is a game in which human souls are at stake. So he asks Synod to be patient because that is his future welfare. So this is important. Human souls are at stake. Then Mahatma ji spoke in detail about Stanton Moses, his spiritual guide, the imperator, and about whom Stanton Moses' doubts were never cleared. Mahatma ji also explained about the mission of the highest planetary spirit, who teach the eternal truths by striking the keynote of truth at the start of every cycle. The eternal truths, they impress themselves forcibly upon the plastic minds of the new races so that they can never entirely be lost. Then our great Lord Buddha, when he reached Nirvana, he became a planetary spirit. There cannot be a planetary spirit who has not passed through the stage of human. And this stage of human is basically being mortal. That means to die and to be reborn. So this stage of being human, those planetary spirits might have been passed on another world, not necessarily on earth. But it was Lord Gautam Buddha who passed it on this earth. He was the first of our humanity to have reached that stage. And he can exercise the power of Nirira Namastak. That is to have a conscious life and spirit in the higher worlds while still having a full conscious life in the body on earth. So we will continue from here onwards, and I will share my slides with you. Okay, so we have completed up to slide 14, and now we are beginning from the slide number 15. It says, you are right. Every diamond, every crystal, every plant and star has its own individual soul, besides man and animal. And there is a hierarchy of souls from the lowest forms of matter up to the world soul. But you are mistaken when adding to the above the assurance that the spirits of the departed hold direct psychic communication with souls that are still connected with the human body, for they do not. Now, we know that Theosophy affirms there is no dead matter. Every particle of matter is pervaded by the divine spirit. Hence, every particle has a divine soul. Particles of matter, they are held together, making up forms, simple forms, complex forms, and each form has its own individual consciousness or its own soul. All of these individual souls, they are connected because everything in the universe lives and moves and has its being in the life of some greater being. So this is how hierarchies are formed. For example, consider every atom in the human body. It is pursuing its individual life and it belongs to the hierarchy of cells in the human body. Then each human being belongs to the hierarchy of the human kingdom on earth. And on earth, there are 10 kingdoms which are evolving. That is in the earth chain. The earth itself belongs to the hierarchy of planets in the solar system. In the solar system, the sun itself is a member in the hierarchy of 12 suns. The hierarchy continues up to the Raj sun and then beyond further to the world soul. So this is how the entire universe, it is in the form of hosts of hierarchies. Further, Mahatma KH categorically rules out that the spirits of the departed psychically communicate with the souls of the living, for they do not. And we will see why it is not possible. Next point, however ethereal and purified of gross matter they may be, the pure spirits are still subject to the physical and universal laws of matter. They cannot, if even they would, span the abyss that separates their worlds from ours. They can be visited in spirit. Their spirit cannot descend and reach us. They attract, they cannot be attracted. Their spiritual polarity being an insuperable difficulty in the way. Now, spirit can manifest only through a vehicle of body or matter. Pure spirit is not manifest. This is true even for the most high and pure spirits. Even they require a thin film of matter, which necessarily means that they are subjected to the universal laws of matter. The laws applicable to the world of living and to the world of dead. World of dead means the spirit world. So those laws, they do not allow communication between these two worlds. It is only that we can raise our individual consciousness to the level of the departed spirits, but the other way around is not possible. Next, Mahatma Ji says, by the by, you must not trust Isis literally. Isis here is the book Isis Unveiled. The book is but a tentative effort to divert the attention of the spiritualists from their preconceptions to the true state of things. The author was made to hint and point out the true direction, to say what things are not what they are. A few real mistakes have crept in, as where divine essence is made emanating from Adam instead of the reverse. So I'm sure many of you must have read this book, Isis Unveiled, which was written by Madame Blavatsky. And it was the first effort to point in the direction of the occult truths for removing the misconceptions which were prevalent. So there was no explanation of what is the truth, but just a pointer in the direction. And this book went into print even though certain mistakes had crept in it. And these are the mistakes about which Mahatma Ji is warning in it. He gives one example that instead of saying that Adam, the primordial man, which emanated from the divine spirit, the print contained the statement that divine essence emanated from Adam. These are logical things. While we are reading the book, we have to keep these in mind. I'm not sure whether in the later editions of ISIS unveiled, these mistakes, they may have been corrected, perhaps. Further, he adds, I will endeavor to explain to you still clearer, where lies the impossibility. Impossibility of the communication between the living and the dead. You will thus be answered in regard to both planetary spirits and the seance room spirits. So, further in the letter, Mahatma Ji has clarified why there is this impossibility of spirit communication. That we'll see here in this slide. So, he starts the explanation from the beginning, from the evolution, planetary evolution. And this figure on the right side, I have inserted for clarity. It is not there in the letter. The letter says, the cycle of intelligent existences commences at the highest worlds or planets. The term highest meaning here the most spiritually perfect. Evoluting from cosmic matter, which is Akash, the primeval, not the secondary plastic medium or ether of science, instinctively suspected, unproven as the rest. Man first evolutes from this matter in its most sublimated state, appearing at the threshold of eternity as a perfectly ethereal, not spiritual entity, say a planetary spirit. He is but one remove from the universal and spiritual world essence, the anima mundi of the Greeks, or that which humanity in its spiritual decadence, that means spiritual decline, has degraded into a mythical personal god. Now, if we remember about the cycle of evolution, first of all, Mahatma Ji says that man did not evolve from ether, which science talks about. So this was in the 19th century when they were researching on the speed of light. So the scientists had come up with the conclusion that in the world there must be pervading some medium through which light is traveling. So Mahatma Ji is saying that man did not evolve from that ether which science talks about, but rather from Akash. Akash is the primeval cosmic matter. We know that it is the fifth cosmic element. Theosophy says that there are 7 elements. And Mahatma Ji says that the cycle of intelligent existences commences at the highest world or planets. So what is this highest world? To understand this, we should recall that every planet has a 7-fold existence. Everything in the universe is 7-fold. So including our Earth. The Earth has 6 sister globes. They occupy the same space, but they are made up of different grades of matter. And together they form the Earth chain through which an evolutionary cycle takes place. So this one evolutionary cycle is called the Great Circle or Manvantar. And these globes, they exist on the 4 lower planes of our world, the physical, the astral, mental, buddhic. And they are denoted by the letters A to D as the descending arc and from D to G as the ascending arc. Now globe D is our Earth, the physical globe, which is on the physical plane. And the globe A and G, they are the highest worlds. So when Mahatma Ji says that the cycle of intelligent existences commences at the highest world, it means it commences on globe A. Globe A and G, they are the most spiritually perfect worlds. And man on globe A was vastly different from the man that we know today on the physical globe D. He evolved from the primeval cosmic matter Akash. So he had a very sublime or ethereal form, like a planetary spirit. But then he was not a spiritual entity. He was just a ethereal, that means made of sublime matter. He was a ethereal entity. And on this globe A, man is but one remove from the universal and spiritual world essence. So this essence, the spiritual world essence, is the Atma or the pure spirit. And spirit cannot manifest without a vehicle. So the most sublime matter, that is Buddhi. Buddhi becomes the vehicle covering the Atma on globe A. So that is the meaning, Atma Buddhi. That was how man was on globe A. And Mahatma Ji says that man has degraded this universal spiritual essence into personal God. But this essence is actually a universal principle. It is not an anthropomorphic being. Hence, at that stage, the spirit man is at best an active power, an immutable, therefore an unthinking principle. The term immutable being again used here, but to denote that state for the time being. The immutability applying here, but to the inner principle, which will vanish and disappear as soon as the speck of the material in him will start on its cyclic whirl of evolution and transformation. So, spirit man. Now, we know that consciousness and power are inherent in the manifested spirit. Consciousness and power. So, man on globe A is like an unchanging active power because spirit or Atma is immutable, it is unchanging. At this stage, he is called unthinking principle. Why is he unthinking? Because thinking principle is manas. And when he is on globe A, that the manas principle is not yet evoluted, it is not yet in existence. So this stage is called unthinking principle. And he will reach that stage the moment he begins his evolutionary cycle on the descending arc. He will be transformed, and so then this immutability will go away, he will change, and his principles will be acquired one by one, his lower vehicles and the lower principles. In his subsequent descent and in proportion of the increase of matter, he will assert more and more his activity. So descent into matter will evolve the senses of man. See, on globe A, it is only Akash. Then we know how the 5 cosmic elements, they evolve one from the other. Akash, Vayu, Agni, Jal, and Prithvi. So that is basically the descent into matter. The senses will evolve in man correspondingly: hearing, touch, form, taste, and smell. And it also makes the form or the body more dense as he descends into matter. So this will evolve the organs of action, and this will enable corresponding activity of man. Now, the congregaries of the star world, meaning the collection of star worlds, including our own planet inhabited by intelligent beings, may be likened to an orb, rather an epicycloid formed of rings like a chain, worlds interlinked together, the totality representing an imaginary endless ring or circle. The progress of man throughout the whole, from its starting to its closing points, meeting on the highest point of its circumference, is what we call the Mahayoga or the great cycle, the kuklos in, this is in Greek, kuklos, whose head is lost in a crown of absolute spirit and its lowest point of circumference in absolute matter, to the point of cessation of action of the active principle. In using a more familiar term, we call the great cycle the macrocosm and its component parts or the interlinked star worlds microcosm. The occultist meaning in representing each of the latter as perfect copies of the former will become evident. The great is the prototype of the smaller cycles, and as such, each star world has in its turn its own cycle of evolution, which starts with a purer and ends with a grosser or more material nature. So basically in this slide, Mahatma Ji is explaining the 7 globes of the earth, which is the grand cycle, and also the cycle which takes place on each of the globe, that is the minor cycle. So major cycle and minor cycle. The 7 globes of the earth, they can be thought of as chains which are interlinked worlds. And we must always keep in mind that when we showed the diagram, those globes are not on separate planes like in layers. They are interpenetrating. They are occupying the same space because all the planes are also interpenetrating each other. But we can think of these globes as a chain of interlinked worlds. And the progress of man happens successively on each of these globes. The starting point of evolution is globe A, that is on the fourth plane. And the closing point of evolution is on globe G, which is also on the fourth plane. So this complete round of evolution is called a Mahayoga, or the great cycle, which is called kuklos in Greek. Okay. So life wave passing from globe A to B to C to D, descending order, and then back from D to E, F, and G, the ascending order. That is one complete circle or the great cycle. Now we can see that the highest point of this great circle, that is on the fourth plane where the globe A and G are positioned. So this great cycle, or rather the highest point, it is on the fourth plane, which is the Buddhic plane. And the Buddhic plane is just one remove from the Atmic plane. To make this clearer, I will show the diagram again from this slide number 17. So this globe A and the globe G, they are just one remove from the Atmic plane. And this Atmic plane is basically the plane of Nirvana, or the plane of absolute spirit. And the lowest point is on globe D. The globe D, that is the lowest plane or the physical plane, our current Earth. So this is the great cycle or macrocosm. Now, likewise, the same cycle or a similar cycle takes place on each of the 7 globes, which are called microcosm. So on every as the evolution goes through its own cycle of higher purity at one end and more material nature at its opposite end. So this is referring to the 7 races which happen on each globe. Now we know that the first races, they are very ethereal, and as the second, third races evolve, they become more material in nature, the fourth race being the most material, and then fifth race onwards, again the spiritual component starts increasing and the material component starts decreasing. So that is the meaning of each globe goes through its own cycle of higher purity at one end and more material nature at its opposite end. This great cycle of evolution goes through all 7 globes, and it is representative or prototype of each of the smaller cycles which are happening on each globe. On each globe, the 7 races are evolving, and on the macrocosmic scale, the life wave is passing through each of the 7 globes. So it is just a reflection. What is happening at a higher level is also happening at a lower level. Okay, so this was the macrocosmic cycle and the microcosmic cycle. So moving on further, as they descend, each world presents itself naturally more and more shadowy, becoming at the antipodes absolute matter. Propelled by the irresistible cyclic impulse, the planetary spirit has to descend before he can reascend. On his way, he has to pass through the whole ladder of evolution, missing no rung, to halt at every star world as he would at a station. And besides the unavoidable cycle of that particular and every respective star world, to perform in it his own life cycle too. That is, returning and reincarnating as many times as he fails to complete his round of life in it, as he dies on it before reaching the age of reason, as correctly stated in Isis. So this, if we read this statement carefully, it is basically the third fundamental proposition, which is given in the Secret Doctrine, Volume 1. It is the cycle of necessity. What it means is that as the life wave passes from globe A to B to C and then to D, spirituality decreases and materiality increases, because this is the descending arc. Matter becomes more dense. It becomes more shadowy rather than ethereal. Why is it shadowy? Because when it becomes dense, light cannot pass through it, so it will cast a shadow, and the shadow will be more and more dense. So matter becomes dense and less ethereal. And the planetary spirit, which evolves or begins its cycle of evolution from globe A, it on each globe, it will descend to each globe, and on each globe, it will pass through 7 minor cycles of that globe, meaning the 7 root races on each globe. And in each of these races, it will reincarnate in accordance with the cyclic and karmic law. This is what the third fundamental proposition also says, to go through this cycle according to the cyclic and karmic law. Then it mentions the age of reason. Age of reason means the stage when manas becomes an active principle in man. And this happened in the middle of the third root race. Manas is the reasoning principle in man. That is why it is called the age of reason. And here in the letter, Mahatma Ji also affirms that it is the same human ego which incarnates in successive human bodies. But the human ego cannot reincarnate in animal form. That means when it has evolved into the human ego, it will not take up an animal form. It will always take up a human form. So this is actually mentioned in the letter. I have not put it on the slide. And in the letter, Mahatma Ji also mentioned that Mrs. Anna Kingsford, who was one of the member of the London Lodge, she could not understand all these concepts. She found it very difficult to discriminate between soul and spirit, between animal and spiritual ego, between Jivatma and Kamrup. So it is essential that we understand all these terms. See, we have the benefit that now the secret doctrine is also printed and there are so many commentaries on it. So we can have more clarity on these concepts. But at that time, the members of the London Lodge, they had no such help. So they had to just read, or rather Senate had to just read these letters and understand the concepts which Mahatma Ji was trying to convey. The second point says, after circling, so to say, along the arc of the cycle, circling along and within it, the daily and yearly rotations of the earth is as good an illustration as any. When the spirit man reaches our planet, which is one of the lowest, having lost at every station some of the ethereal and acquired an increase of material nature, both spirit and matter have become pretty much equilibrized in him. So in his evolutionary journey from the globe A to D on the descending arc, man is becoming less ethereal and more material. That is his form. His form is becoming less ethereal and more material on each globe. So circling along the great cycle means moving from globe to globe. And moving within it, it means the minor cycle on each globe. Okay, so this is how Mahatma Ji is trying to explain to Senate, because at that time this vocabulary was not there. The great cycle, that means life wave passing through all the 7 globes, and on each globe going through 7 root races. So all this vocabulary evolved only later when the secret doctrine was written. That is why he is using all these examples when he says the yearly cycle of the earth around the sun. Okay, and one more point in the previous slide. As man moves on to the next globe or the next station, his form is becoming dense, and on the globe D, on physical earth, spirit and matter are in equilibrium in man. This means that the spiritual nature and the material nature in man is balanced. Man can be as much spiritual as he can be material while he is on this globe D, that is on physical earth. So he can choose to move up the spiritual path, or he can descend even lower into materiality. That is his choice. And at this point on globe D, spirituality and materiality, they are in equilibrium. So we have to exercise our choice with great caution. Then we go to the next slide. But then he has the Earth's cycle to perform. And as in the progress of involution and evolution downward, matter is ever striving to stifle spirit. When arrived to the lowest point of his pilgrimage, the once pure planetary spirit will be found dwindled to what science agrees to call a primitive or primordial man, amidst a nature as primordial, speaking geologically. For physical nature keeps pace with the physiological as well as the spiritual man in her cyclic career. Now here, the pure planetary spirit, which was there on globe A, it began the evolutionary, sorry, it began on the evolutionary cycle on the descending arc, and it reached globe D, that is our Earth. When it reaches on globe D, the form that it has taken, it is that of the primordial man, which science knows. We speak about that, the primordial man on globe D. And on this descending arc, his material nature has grown stronger, dominating his spiritual nature. That is why it has reached the lowest point. He has reached halfway through the grand cycle and must pass through all the 7 stages of the small cycle. When man first appeared on physical earth, geologically, the earth was also in a primitive or primordial stage. And the geological or physical progress of earth's formation happens in parallel with the physiological and spiritual development of man. So as the principles or as the material form of man is evolving, so also the features or the material form of earth evolves. They are corresponding to each other. At the point, that next point, at that point, the great law begins its work of selection. Matter found entirely divorced from spirit is thrown over into the still lower worlds, into the 6th gati, or way of birth, way of rebirth of the vegetable and mineral worlds and of the primitive animal forms. From thence, matter ground over in the workshop of nature proceeds soulless back to its mother fount, while the egos purified of their dross are enabled to resume their progress once more forward. Now, this is a very important law. Mahatma Ji says that the great law begins its work of selection. This law, it determines which egos will continue their evolution and which egos will perish. So basically, he will speak about the laggard egos. The laggard egos will perish, and only the egos who will be able to progress further, they will continue on their cycle of evolution. So this law works in the minor cycle, that means the evolution through 7 races, and it also works in the grand cycle, that means the evolution through 7 globes. So see, two concepts of evolution are being talked about here. One is the evolution through the 7 globes, the grand cycle. Okay, and the second is evolution on the earth through the 7 root races. So that is minor cycle. And this law of selection is working in both the cases, in the grand cycle as well as the minor cycle. So just to give an idea about the minor cycle, in the minor cycle, what happens? Now, this is not mentioned in the letter. This I'm giving so that we can see the correspondence. We know that the transition of monads from animal kingdom to human kingdom, it was halted in the middle of the 4th root race. So the 7 kingdoms are there, 3 elemental kingdoms, then mineral, animal, mineral, plant, animal, human. Okay, and the evolution of life is happening through each of these kingdoms. It transitions from one kingdom to the next. So from the animal kingdom, transition to human kingdom, it was halted in the middle of the 4th root race as per this law of selection. It is mentioned in Secret Doctrine that the door was closed, so to say. Because any monads entering the human kingdom after this period, they will not have sufficient time to complete the goal that is set for humanity, for human evolution by the 7th root race. So there is a certain goal that by 7th root race, what is the level humanity has to achieve? So if any new monads are coming into this cycle of human evolution after the 4th root race, they will not have sufficient time to reach that goal. Okay, so that door closes in the middle of the 4th root race. Now, similarly, what happens in the cycle? Grand cycle is when evolution is happening from one globe to the next. So, in the grand cycle, when human monads are moving from one globe to next, and they reach the globe D, our physical globe, then this is the midpoint of the grand cycle. Our globe is the fourth globe. It is the midpoint. At this stage, man was only the shadowy form, the animal man with no divine spark. Okay? Man, only in form it is like human, but actually his nature is brute. He is the animal man in human form with no divine spark. The mind principle was not activated. Then came the lords of the flame. Some lords of the flame are the lords from Venus. They came in the middle of the third root race on our globe, on the physical globe. Some of them themselves incarnated in the animal man. Some provided only their spark. That is, spark is the manas. Manas was activated. While some meaning the lords of the flame, some of them, they deferred taking birth in such mankind. I'll read the statement again. It is very important. Then came the lords of the flame from Venus. Some themselves incarnated in the animal man. Some provided only their divine spark, that is the manas, while some deferred taking birth in such mankind because it was a very brute form. They didn't take birth in that. Therefore, those men, they remained mindless, in whom the lords of flame did not incarnate or send their spark. Such men, they remained mindless. In such kind of men, matter had totally stifled the spirit. The men who remained mindless, who did not receive the divine spark, in them, matter totally stifled the spirit. No spiritual light was able to guide their material nature. Such kind of men became the laggard egos, those who made slow progress and they fell behind the others. They would not be able to achieve the goal set for human progression in the seventh globe, because now we are talking about the grand cycle. So we are on the fourth globe, and till the time we reach the seventh globe, a certain achievement or a certain evolution has to be completed. But those men who did not receive the divine spark, they will not be able to progress and reach the goal on the seventh globe. So they are the laggard egos, and thus they no longer incarnated in human form, but they perished. They attained the sixth gati. The sixth gati, Mahatmaji clearly states, is being reborn in the vegetable and mineral world or as primitive animals, becoming soulless. Soul is what? Soul is the manas, right? That is the human soul. So that is why they became soulless, because their manas was not activated, and they go back, they are born in the vegetable, mineral or primitive animal kingdom. Those men in whom the lords of flame themselves incarnated, or who received the divine spark, they were able to purify their animal nature, and they progressed and they continued on the ascending arc. This was the work of selection of the great law in the grand cycle. So this work of selection in the minor cycle and in the grand cycle, two places. I hope this is clear to everyone, because it involves a lot of imagination, I guess. We move to the next slide. It is here meaning when this law is working. So it is here then that the laggard egos perish by the millions. It is the solemn moment of the survival of the fittest, the annihilation of those unfit. It is but matter or material man which is compelled by its own weight to descend to the very bottom of the circle of necessity, to there assume animal form. As to the winner of that race throughout the worlds, the spiritual ego, he will ascend from star to star, from one world to another, circling onward to re-become the once pure planetary spirit, then higher still to finally reach its first starting point, and from thence to merge into mystery. So this is exactly what we explained in the previous slide also. The laggard egos are those who did not receive the divine spark from the Lord of Flames. There was no spiritual light to guide their material nature. So they could not make the progress to achieve the goal set for human progression in the grand cycle. Millions of such egos perished, meaning they attained the sixth gati. They were born as lower animal forms instead of continuing as humans. Reason for their perishing was their own material nature, which could not keep pace with the spiritual progression of man. Those in whom the manas is activated, such spiritual egos, ego is what? Atma, Buddhi, Manas. So, in whom the manas is activated, such spiritual egos will be guided by their reasoning manas and the light of Buddhi. So, they continue from globe D to E to F and G on the ascending arc. And on globe G, they will re-become the pure planetary spirit with full and independent conscious existence. And all the experience which they have gathered throughout their pilgrimage in the grand cycle. The evolution doesn't stop here. The evolution will continue on the higher planes to finally merge into the one absolute, which Mahatma Ji is calling here as mystery. No adept has ever penetrated beyond the wheel of primitive cosmic matter. The highest, the most perfect vision is limited to the universe of form and matter. So this, our world of form and matter, it comprises of the four lower plane. Because even Buddhi, after all, is a form of subtle matter. So the four lower planes, physical, astral, mental, Buddhic, they are the world of form and matter. And Buddhi, we know, is the vehicle of Atma. It is the first wheel of matter which covers the spirit or the Atma. And Mahatma Ji is saying that no adept has been able to penetrate beyond this wheel of cosmic matter, primitive cosmic matter. I think we'll take one more slide and then we can stop for today's session. Further in the letter, Mahatma Ji mentions, but my explanation does not end here. We want to know why it is deemed supremely difficult, if not utterly impossible, for pure disembodied spirits to communicate with men through mediums or phantomosophy. So this was the basic question initially what he was explaining to Sinet, why there can be no communication between spirit world and the living world. I say because on account of the antagonistic atmospheres respectively surrounding these worlds, B, on the of the entire dissimilarity of physiological and spiritual conditions, and C, because that chain of worlds I have just been telling you about is not only an epicycloid but an elliptical orbit of existences, having as every ellipse not one but 2 points, that is two foci, which can never approach each other, man being at one focus of it and pure spirit at the other. To this, you might object, I can neither help it nor change the fact, but there is still another and far mightier impediment. So basically, Mahatma Ji has given the reasons why there can be no communication. The occult doctrine considers that communication between men and disembodied spirits through mediums is extremely difficult, if not impossible. And three reasons are given for this. The first, that the atmosphere surrounding the spirit world is opposed to that surrounding the world of living men. Second is that the physiological state of man, it is totally different from the state of an entity who is no longer in the physical body. Therefore, it cannot communicate. And third point is that the grand cycle within which the 7 minor cycles are occurring, it is likened to an ellipse. So it is not circular, it is not a ring or a circle. It is likened to an ellipse. An ellipse is a slightly elongated circle. So it has two different centers of focus. That is the foci, two different centers of focus. One center being spirit and the other center being matter. And the two can never become one. Mahatma Ji says that even if one may not believe in this occult doctrine, that does not change the fact the facts still remain. Moreover, there is still an even stronger obstacle which bars this kind of communication. So that we will see in the next session. What are the still more impediments which bar this communication between the two worlds? So with this, I conclude the session for today. And after we have the Hindi translation from Sister Meenakshi ji, then we can discuss on this, because I'm sure there are some very deep rooted points in this about the cycle, the grand cycle and the minor cycle and the legard egos. So, Sister Meenakshi ji, I invite you for the Hindi translation.
नमस्ते, थैंक यू सिस्टर। आज हम महात्मा लेटर नंबर 18 का अगला पार्ट ले रहे हैं। इस पार्ट में मास्टर कहते हैं, आप सही है कि मनुष्य और पशु के अलावा प्रत्येक हीरा, प्रत्येक स्फटिक, प्रत्येक पौधे की और तारे की अपनी व्यक्तिगत चेतना होती है और पदार्थ के निम्नतम रूपों से लेकर विश्व चेतना तक चेतनाओं का एक हायरार्की होती है। लेकिन इसमें जोड़ते समय आप गलत है जब आप इस बात पर जोर देते हैं कि दिवंगतों की आत्माएं उन आत्माओं के साथ सीधे साइकिक संपर्क रखती है जो अभी भी मानवीय शरीर से जुड़ी हुई है, क्योंकि वे ऐसा नहीं करते। भले ही शुद्ध आत्माएं ईथर युक्त हो और जड़त्व से मुक्त हो, फिर भी वे पदार्थ के भौतिक और सार्वभौमिक नियमों के अधीन हैं। उनके जगत को हमारे जगत से विभाजित करने वाली अगाध खाई को भी उन्होंने, यानी दिवंगतों की आत्माएं यदि पार किया तब भी वे संपर्क नहीं कर सकते। उनसे आत्मा के स्तर से भेंट की जा सकती है, उनकी आत्मा हम तक पहुंचने में नीचे नहीं उतर सकती। वे आकर्षित करते हैं, उन्हें आकर्षित नहीं किया जा सकता। उनकी स्पिरिचुअल पोलैरिटी उनके मार्ग में अलंघ्य कठिनाई है। आपको आइसिस पर शब्दशः भरोसा नहीं करना चाहिए। यह किताब अध्यात्मवादियों की पूर्व धारणाओं को वस्तु स्थिति की ओर मोड़ने के लिए एक प्रयोगात्मक प्रयास है। सही दिशा को इंगित करने और संकेत करने के लिए चीजें जो नहीं है, न कि वे क्या है, इसे बताने के लिए लेखिका द्वारा किया गया पेज नंबर 1 चैप्टर 1 वॉल्यूम 1 में दिया है। कुछ यथोचित गलतियां सामने आई, जहां दिव्य सत्व यानी डिवाइन एसेंस को एडम से उत्पन्न होते हुए दर्शाया गया है, बजाय इसके विपरीत के। असंभवता कहाँ है, इसे मैं आपको स्पष्ट रूप से समझाने का प्रयास करूंगा। इस तरह आपको प्लैनेटरी स्पिरिट्स और सियांस रूम्स के स्पिरिट्स के बारे में उत्तर दिए जाएंगे। ज्ञानियों के अस्तित्व का चक्र उच्चतम जगत या ग्रहों पर शुरू होता है। यहाँ उच्चतम का अर्थ है आध्यात्मिकता में सबसे परिपूर्ण, यानी ग्लोब ए में शुरू होता है। कॉस्मिक मैटर जो कि आकाश है, जो मूल है, आद्य है, न कि विज्ञान के कल्पित विचार के ईथर, जिसे अभी तक साबित नहीं किया गया। मनुष्य सर्वप्रथम इस मैटर से अपने सबसे उच्च अवस्था में विकसित होता है, जो ब्रह्मांड की सीमा पर पूर्ण रूप से इथेरियल एंटिटी के रूप में प्रकट होता है, न कि आध्यात्मिक इकाई जैसे एक प्लैनेटरी स्पिरिट। वह सार्वभौमिक और आध्यात्मिक जगत सत्व से एक स्तर कम है। ग्रीक्स जिसे अनिमा मुंडी कहते हैं, या जिसे मानव जाति ने अपने आध्यात्मिक पतन में एक कल्पित व्यक्तिगत भगवान का रूप देकर अवक्रमित किया है। इस तरह इस स्तर पर मनुष्य आत्मा एक सक्रिय शक्ति है, अपरिवर्त्य है, इसीलिए एक अचिंत्य तत्व है, अनथिंकिंग प्रिंसिपल। इम्यूटेबल यानी अचल, अस्थिर, इस शब्द का उपयोग उस स्थिति को उतने ही समय तक दर्शाने के लिए किया जा रहा है। यहाँ इम्यूटेबिलिटी सिर्फ इनर प्रिंसिपल को ही लागू हो रही है, जो उसमें के पदार्थ के कण में विकास और रूपांतरण के चक्रीय कार्य शुरू होते ही लुप्त हो जाएंगे। अनुक्रम से नीचे की ओर बढ़ने पर और पदार्थ की वृद्धि के अनुपात में वह अपनी गतिविधि पर अधिक से अधिक जोर देगा। अब बुद्धिमान जीवों द्वारा बसे हुए स्टार वर्ल्ड यानी 7 ग्लोब्स के समूहों की तुलना एक ऑर्ब या वृत्त से की जा सकती है, बल्कि एक माला की तरह रिंग से बने एपिसाइक्लॉइड से की जा सकती है। आपस में जुड़े हुए जगत समग्र रूप से एक काल्पनिक अंतहीन वलय या वृत्त को दर्शाता है। संपूर्ण चक्र के दौरान मनुष्य की प्रगति शुरुआती बिंदु से लेकर अंतिम बिंदु वलय की परिधि के सर्वोच्च बिंदु पर मिलने तक, जिसे हम महायुग या ग्रेट साइकिल कहते हैं, वह कुकलॉस जिसका सिर परब्रह्म के मुकुट में हो गया है और उसकी परिधि का निम्नतम बिंदु मूल प्रकृति में अर्थात सक्रिय तत्व के गतिविधि के विराम का है। अधिक परिचित शब्द का उपयोग करें तब हम ग्रेट साइकिल को माइक्रोकॉस्म और उसके संघटक भागों को या आपस में जुड़े हुए ग्लोब्स को माइक्रोकॉस्म कहते हैं। माइक्रोकॉस्म यह मैक्रोकॉस्म का पूर्णतः प्रतिरूप है। इसे दर्शाने में गूढ़ ज्ञानियों का मतितार्थ स्पष्ट हो जाएगा। महायुग यह छोटे युगों का आद्य रूप है और इस तरह प्रत्येक ग्लोब का अपना विकास चक्र होता है, जो शुद्धत्व से शुरू होता है और अति स्थूल घनत्व या अति भौतिकता के साथ समाप्त होता है। जैसे ही वह विकास नीचे उतरती है, जैसे ही वह साइकिल ऑफ इवोल्यूशन नीचे उतरती है, प्रत्येक जगत अपने आप को स्वाभाविक रूप से अधिक घनीभूत प्रस्तुत करता है। प्रतिमुख स्थान में वह एब्सोल्यूट मैटर बनती है, पूर्ण पदार्थ बनती है। अप्रतिरोध्य साइक्लिक इंपल्स से प्रेरित होकर प्लैनेटरी स्पिरिट को पुनः आरोहण करने से पहले अवरोहण करना होता है। अपने मार्ग में उसे विकास क्रम की पूर्ण सीढ़ी से गुजरना होता है, किसी भी पायदान को न छोड़कर, प्रत्येक ग्लोब पर रुकते हुए, जैसे कि एक स्टेशन पर रुकता है, और उस प्रत्येक विशिष्ट और संबंधित ग्लोब के अपरिहार्य चक्र के अलावा उसमें अपना जीवन चक्र व्यतीत करने अर्थात समय से पूर्व ही मृत्यु होने से उसमें अपने जीवन को पूर्ण करने में वह जितनी बार विफल होता है, उसे पुनः वापस आकर पुनर्जन्म लेना होगा। आइसिस में इसका कारण सही रूप से बताया गया है। ऐसा कहे कि काल चक्र के घुमाव पथ के साथ चक्कर लगाने के बाद उसके साथ और उसके भीतर चक्कर लगाने पर पृथ्वी की दैनिक और वार्षिक परिक्रमा इसका एक अच्छा उदाहरण है। मनुष्य आत्मा जब हमारे ग्रह पर पहुंचती है, जो सब में से निम्न स्तर पर है, प्रत्येक स्थानक या ग्लोब पर कुछ इथरीय पदार्थ की क्षति होने पर और भौतिक प्रकृति की वृद्धि हासिल कर स्पिरिट और मैटर दोनों काफी हद तक साम्यावस्था में होते हैं। लेकिन अब उसे पृथ्वी पर का काल चक्र व्यतीत करना और नीचे की ओर अवक्रमण और अपकर्ष की प्रक्रिया में मैटर हमेशा स्पिरिट को जकड़ती है। अपनी यात्रा के निम्नतम चरम पर जब वह पहुंचता है, प्लैनेटरी स्पिरिट जो कभी शुद्ध पवित्र था, वह अब क्षीण होता है, यानी ग्लोब डी पर, जिसे विज्ञान भौगोलिक रूप से प्रारंभिक सृष्टि के बीच या आदि मानव कहते हैं, क्योंकि भौतिक सृष्टि अपने चक्रीय कालक्रमण में स्थूल और आध्यात्मिक मनुष्य के साथ साथ गतिमान है। उस चरण पर महान सिद्धांत यानी ग्रेट लॉ चयन का कार्य शुरू करती है। स्पिरिट से पूरी तरह से अलग हुई मैटर और अधिक निम्नतर जगतों में, वनस्पति और खनिज जगतों के छठी गति और आदिम पशु रूपों में झोंक दी जाती है। इसके बाद सृष्टि की कार्यशाला में स्थापित हुआ मैटर वापस चेतना रहित अपने उद्गम में जाने के लिए अग्रसर होता है, जबकि वे जीवात्मा जो अपने अशुद्धि से शुद्ध हुए हैं पुनः आगे की प्रगति के लिए सक्षम होते हैं। यहीं पर करोड़ों पिछड़े जीवात्माओं का विनाश होता है। जो योग्यतम है उनका बने रहने का, अक्षमों के विनाश का महत्वपूर्ण क्षण होता है। जो योग्यतम है उनके बने रहने का और अक्षमों के विनाश का महत्वपूर्ण क्षण होता है, यानी सर्वाइवल ऑफ द फिटेस्ट और अयोग्यों के विनाश का महत्वपूर्ण क्षण। यह केवल पदार्थ यानी मैटर है जो अपने स्वयं के जड़त्व से सर्कल ऑफ नेसेसिटी पुनर्जन्म के चक्र के निचले स्तर में पशु रूप धारण करने के लिए उतरने पर मजबूर होता है। संपूर्ण जगतों में मानव जाति के विजेता के रूप में स्पिरिचुअल ईगो एक ग्लोब से दूसरे ग्लोब में, एक जगत से दूसरे जगत में आरोहण करेगा, ऊर्ध्वगमन करेगा, आगे बढ़ेगा और पुनः पहले जैसा शुद्ध पवित्र प्लैनेटरी स्पिरिट बनेगा। फिर उससे भी ऊपर आखिर में अपने पहले वाले शुरुआती उच्चतर बिंदु तक पहुंच जाएगा और वहां से परम तत्व में विलीन होगा, रहस्यमयता में विलीन होगा। किसी भी जीवन मुक्त ने अभी तक आदि ब्रह्मांडीय पदार्थ के आच्छादन से परे प्रवेश नहीं किया। उच्चतम श्रेष्ठतम दिव्य दृष्टि विश्व के रूप और पदार्थों तक ही सीमित है। लेकिन मेरा खुलासा यहीं पर समाप्त नहीं होगा। आप जानना चाहते हैं कि शुद्ध विदेही आत्माओं को माध्यमों द्वारा मनुष्य के साथ संवाद करना पूरी तरह से असंभव नहीं पर बेहद मुश्किल क्यों माना जाता है? इसके कारण मैं इस प्रकार बताता हूँ। मास्टर कहते हैं, इसका कारण बताते हैं कि इन वर्ड्स को चारों ओर घेरे हुए क्रमानुसार विरोधी वातावरण के कारण, शारीरिक और आध्यात्मिक स्थितियों की संपूर्ण असमानता तथा क्योंकि वह चेन ऑफ वर्ल्ड जिसके बारे में अभी बताया है वह न केवल एक एपिसाइक्लॉइड है बल्कि जीवन अस्तित्व की एक अंडाकृति परिक्रमा पथ है, जिसमें प्रत्येक अंडाकार के एक नहीं बल्कि दो बिंदु हैं जो कभी भी एक दूसरे तक नहीं पहुंच सकते हैं। इसके एक केंद्र बिंदु पर मनुष्य और दूसरे पर विशुद्ध आत्मा होती है। इस पर आपको आपत्ति हो सकती है। मैं न तो इसकी मदद कर सकता हूँ और न ही तथ्यों को बदल सकता हूँ, लेकिन अभी भी एक और बड़ी बाधा है। थैंक यू। नमस्ते।
Thank you, Meenakshi ji, for the translation. And now I invite anybody, if they have any questions or some point to discuss, they may please unmute themselves and speak.
हेलो, नमस्ते मीनाक्षी जी। मैं शीतल गोले बात कर रही हूँ।
हाँ, नमस्ते शीतल जी।
हाँ जी, हाँ, हो सकता है मेरी समझ माइनर है, लेकिन मुझे पूछना था कि ये जो माइक्रोकॉस्म यानी माइनर ग्लोब्स जो है ABC, तो क्या यहाँ पे पुनर्जन्म होता है क्या?
मास्टर्स ने क्या लिखा है कि हर ग्लोब पे 7 साइकिल्स होती हैं। जैसे हमारे फिजिकल ग्लोब पे 7 रूट रेसेस होंगी, तो अब
हाँ.
इसके पहले का जो ग्लोब है, ग्लोब बी, उस पे भी ये 7 साइकिल्स होंगी, लेकिन उसमें वो मिनरल किंगडम में होंगी या प्लांट किंगडम में होंगी या एनिमल किंगडम में होंगी, वो जो भी किंगडम उस पे इवॉल्व हो रही है, ऐसी मेरी समझ है. परहैप्स प्रदीप जी, आप यू कैन थ्रो सम लाइट ऑन दिस, बट 7 cycles are there on each globe.
Okay. Okay. Means if it is a mineral or a vegetation, then that will grow. Means minor vegetation will grow in great trees, etc. Like that.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And second question is, what we listen of an पशु यानी एक मिनट, मैन ये पशु यानी जो हम कहते हैं पिछले यानी हम सुनते आ रहे हैं कि मानव को पशु योनि मिलती है या कोई मिलता है, वैसे तो यहाँ पे हमने हमारे थियोसॉफी ने क्लियर किया है, लेकिन मुझे आपने जो ये बताया जो लगर्स करके, हाँ, तो क्या 6th गति है ना, सो जिन्हें फिर से रिबर्थ लेना पड़ता है, तो क्या वो कथाएं हम सुनते आ रहे थे क्या कि दे आर अगेन टेकिंग रिबर्थ इन पशु योनि और वेजिटेशन और एक्सेट्रा?
इसका कोरिलेशन तो डेफिनेटली है, बट उसका एक्चुअल रीजन क्या है ये थियोसॉफी से क्लियर होता है. हम लोग ऐसे बोलचाल की भाषा में कहते हैं कि जो पाप करेगा तो फिर उसको पशु योनि मिल जाएगी, ऐसा नहीं है. उन्होंने यहाँ पे क्लियरली बताया है कि एक बार अगर जो ईगो है यानी मनस एक्टिवेट हो जाता है, तो आत्मा बुद्धि मनस, ये ईगो अगर ह्यूमन फॉर्म में आ गई है और उसका दैट माइंड इज एक्टिवेटेड, द डिवाइन स्पार्क इज एक्टिवेटेड, तो उसका एवोल्यूशन ह्यूमन फॉर्म में ही आगे चलेगा. केवल अगर ये मनस एक्टिवेट नहीं हुआ है, डिवाइन स्पार्क नहीं एक्टिवेट हुई, तो ऐसे ये माइंडलेस मैन है, उनका केवल फॉर्म ह्यूमन का है लेकिन उनका कार्य बिल्कुल पशु की तरह है. तो ऐसे जो फॉर्म्स हैं वो पेरिश हो जाते हैं, तो वो फिर से पशु योनि में या फिर वेजिटेबल किंगडम में चले जाते हैं.
ओके, लेकिन फिर उनको फिर से इवोल्यूशन के लिए चांसेस नेक्स्ट ग्लोब में मिलेंगे, ऐसा है?
Yes, cycle of evolution will continue. So maybe not in this round, in the next round, they will continue their evolution from plant kingdom to animal to human.
I have heard that they are kept in some mysteries, है ना? It's called mysteries.
Mysteries?
It is it Trishanku in Hindi or our language?
No, that is a different concept.
Okay, okay, thank you. And one more question is, man and spirit cannot be one.
They cannot communicate. Like the world of dead and the world of living, they cannot communicate.
I have not understood this.
Now, what is your question? Please say again.
You have said that man and spirit cannot be cannot communicate because they are two foci.
Yes, two foci of the ellipse. That is an example he is giving. Man, you can consider matter. We are living. We are embodied in a physical body. Okay, and spirit means that the world of the dead. So they don't have a physical body. So these two, there can be no communication between these two worlds. So he's just giving an example, comparing it to an ellipse, because in ellipse there are two centers. They are called the two foci. And in an ellipse, those two centers cannot meet. Otherwise, it will become a circle. It will become one center, right? So it is just an example to show that this communication cannot happen.
Okay, okay.
Yes, Bimalji.
You are saying. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
I just wanted to add something that basically the whatever is the evolutionary pattern that has been given in this book, but it's not in detail. The detail aspect, if one is interested, one has to read Man, Whither, Whence and How by Annie Besant and Leadbeater, and The Inner Life by Leadbeater. These books actually detail this part very clearly. And the part in which you said that part of mankind, that they say that by the 5th round, we are in the 4th round. In the fifth round, 3/5 of humanity will continue its progress, but 2/5 will not continue in this chain. It will go to the next chain.
Correct. This is very true. Yeah, please continue.
So the thing in this, why? Because the persons in the fifth round, by that time they have reached a level of meditation, a certain level of calmness. If they have people around them who have this anger and all those other lower emotions which these have already conquered, it will disturb their meditations, their work. So that is why they are retained. But it doesn't mean that their progress will continue somewhere else. So nothing is wasted in nature. And they will never go back to animal, human, or any other kingdom. And just one very interesting thing, which is very interesting, is that in the mineral kingdom, there is one mineral which is crystals, which does not become plant. It directly becomes human. It is that advanced. And that is why crystals are used for therapy even now. So that is something very interesting, which is mentioned in Pan with the Winds and Out.
That is interesting because even I did not know about this crystal.
I have no knowledge, Bimalji, that crystal is directly become the man. But the question is,
human, goes to the human level.
No. Question is,
goes to the animal level. Sorry, not human.
Suppose a crystal means in a mineral kingdom, he will straight away leaving the plant kingdom, becoming the animal kingdom.
Yes.
Let us go it again. Is it possible? I don't know. I have it is already interesting thing to go through that book again. No, I am going through the Joy Mills book. We will discuss more on our next class, Vibhaji. This is a higher evolution. You mentioned minor evolution, and here. Mahatma in a particular mention that the laggards ego perishes by millions. But if we go through the book, of course it is a letter subsequent to Secret Doctrine, of course to Mahatma letter by man whence and with in that there is clear-cut diagram they have mentioned.
Yeah. Yes. I can share that with you, sir. Can I?
Recently it is published by Indian.
To make it shareable, I will share that picture with you, because in that there's one concept which has to be understood. That in every chain, all the kingdoms are progressing simultaneously. It's not that mineral in one chain and this and that.
Yes. Suppose I am a mineral and I became the laggards. So I will be merged with the next, suppose I am in a mineral, I became the laggards, are not eligible to.
Or we may already be laggards. We don't know.
Just a minute. Go to the higher kingdom, that is the plant kingdom. So the person, the soul, the monads who is coming from the my previous chain, I will be joined together with that minerals who are eligible to come. Eligible to be here, as well as I being the laggard, so we will both face the minerals. So this thing we have to ponder over, and we will discuss more. This higher you just pointed, and also in this letter, very challenging statement Mahatma given for our meditation. The laggards for egos perish, and this is at that point great law begins to work. Selection, matter found entirely diverse from the from spirit is thrown over to the still lower worlds, and you have rightly pointed out, Vibhaji, there if we correlate everything, if that stage, if Atman or monad, they become the divine, having highly developed by some other by Manas, if it is developed, then he will straight away go to man, to human kingdom. I think then he will miss the mineral, plant, and animal kingdoms, animal realms, or the whatever they mentioned. And in a book like that is the Joy Mill's book, she categorically mentioned that you go through the secret. And I don't know why she did not analyze this person. She mentioned you go to the secret doctrine, volume 1, page 178 to get the answer, to know more about this HB. Don't know, so let us we all think over it, meditate it, and there are Susma ji also there, so we'll discuss more on this particular point. Of course, it is in the mentioned in the, that when great laws apply, and this particular, they will go to the still lower worlds. Suppose if a monad at that particular time develop manas or buddhi or manas is there, and if it is developed, whether he will go to the straight to the man, to human kingdom, or if there are who are not developed or are diverse from the spirit, is thrown over to the still lower worlds.
Sir, I think that is further in the letter. We have not reached till that slide that
Okay.
you are talking about the 8th sphere, right? Still lower in the world, in the lower world of matter, that will be the 8th sphere. We will cover that in the next session. And as far as my understanding is that while this evolution is happening, no
Yes.
monad can miss any rung of the ladder.
Yes, that is the question.
Yes, it has to pass through every level,
Pass to
every stage.
Yes.
It cannot jump. So that's my understanding.
So that is, nobody can jump. Even secret say you have to go to the each and every rung with the 749 rungs you have to complete as from elemental 1 to the top.
Yes.
So we'll conclude, and we'll if any further discussion or question, we can go for the next. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you.
So we'll close with the
Yes.
prayer.
VIBHA, close this.
Om Asato ma sadgamaya Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya Mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om Sarvesham swastir bhavatu Sarvesham shantir bhavatu Sarvesham purnam bhavatu Sarvesham mangalam bhavatu Lokaha samasta sukhino bhavantu Sarve bhavantu sukhinah Sarve santu niramaya Sarve bhadrani pashyantu Ma kaschit dukha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, VIBHA, for your nice presentation. Thank you each and everyone for joining.
Bye, everyone.